The sun shone brightly outside, but inside the Grand Chief Anthony's mansion, Susan felt a shadow over her heart. She stood by the tall window of her large bedroom, looking out at the perfect green gardens. The room was filled with beautiful furniture, and her wardrobe was full of expensive dresses. But Susan did not feel happy. She felt like a bird in a beautiful, golden cage. Her mother, Mrs. Anthony, came into the room. She was holding a shimmering blue dress. "Susan, my dear," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "You must wear this tonight. Victor is coming for dinner, and it's important you look your best. You know how much this match means to our family?" Susan turned from the window. The blue dress was lovely, but the thought of wearing it for Victor made her feel tired. Victor was a wealthy young man, chosen by her parents. He was polite and he was rich, but Susan's heart felt nothing for him. "Yes, Mother," Susan said softly, her voice barely a whisper. She did not want to argue. Arguing with her mother was like talking to a stone wall. Mrs. Anthony smiled, a satisfied look on her face. "Good girl. Remember, Susan, a good marriage means a secure future. Love is something that can grow later." She placed the dress on the bed and left the room, her high heels clicking on the polished wooden floor. Susan looked at the dress, then back out the window. A secure future. Was that all life was about? She dreamed of something different, something simpler. She dreamed of a life where her heart could choose, not her parents' bank account. She sighed, feeling the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her. Later that afternoon, Susan escaped to the gardens. The gardens were her sanctuary, the only place in the vast mansion where she felt a little bit free. She loved the smell of the flowers and the quiet rustle of the leaves. She walked along a familiar path, lost in her thoughts. Then she saw him. A young man she hadn't seen before was carefully tending to a bed of roses. He was dressed in some normal gardener's work clothes, and his hands were covered in soil. He moved with a quiet focus, his brow furrowed in concentration as he pruned a delicate rose bush. This must be Sam, the new gardener her father had mentioned briefly. He was different from the other staff. They were always formal, always trying to be invisible. But this young man seemed completely absorbed in his work, almost a part of the garden itself. He had a kind face, and when he paused to wipe his forehead, Susan saw a gentle look in his eyes. As she walked past, a small, leather-bound book of poetry slipped from her hand and fell onto the grass. Before she could pick it up, Sam was there. He retrieved the book, his movements quick and graceful. He brushed a speck of dirt from its cover and handed it to her. Their fingers touched for a moment. "Thank you," Susan said, surprised by the warmth in his simple gesture. Sam just nodded, a small, shy smile appearing on his lips. He didn't say anything, but his eyes met hers for a brief second. Then he turned back to his roses. Susan continued her walk, but her mind was no longer on her troubles. A tiny, unexpected spark of curiosity had been lit within her. There was something about the new gardener, something quiet and real, that made her want to know more. In the days that followed, Susan found herself drawn to the gardens more often. She would take her books and sit on a stone bench near where Sam worked, pretending to read. Sometimes she would ask him a simple question about a flower or a plant. "Sam, what is the name of this beautiful white flower?" she asked one sunny morning, pointing to a delicate bloom. He looked up from his work, his hand still holding a small trowel. "That is a gardenia, Miss Susan," he replied, his voice soft and pleasant. "They have a very sweet smell, especially in the evening." Their conversation started slowly, like a shy vine beginning to grow. They talked about the flowers he cared for, the changing seasons, and the quiet beauty of the garden. Susan learned that Sam was very passionate about his work. He spoke about plants with a knowledge and love that surprised her. One afternoon, as a light rain began to fall, they took shelter together under the wide branches of an old oak tree. "You know so much about flowers," Susan said. "Have you always been a gardener?" Sam looked out at the rain-soaked garden. "I've always loved growing things," he said. "It's peaceful. My dream is to have my own little flower shop one day, a place where I can share this beauty with everyone." He smiled a little sadly. "But that's just a dream. It takes a lot of money to start a business." Susan listened, touched by his simple, heartfelt ambition. It was so different from the talk of stocks and mergers she heard at her parents' dinner table. With Sam, she felt she could breathe. She found herself looking forward to these secret meetings, these quiet moments shared amidst the roses and the rain. He didn't treat her like Miss Anthony, the heiress. He just treated her like Susan. Weeks turned into a month, and Susan's secret meetings with Sam in the garden became the brightest part of her days. They talked about more than just flowers now. Susan found herself sharing her feelings of being trapped, her quiet wish for a life where she could make her own choices. Sam listened patiently, his understanding eyes making her feel safe and heard. He didn't offer easy answers, but his presence was a comfort. Sam, in turn, spoke more about his love for nature and his dream of the flower shop. He described the kinds of flowers he would grow, the way he would arrange them, and the joy he hoped to bring to people. He spoke with a quiet passion that made Susan's heart ache for him to achieve his dream. However, whenever Susan asked about his family or where he came from, Sam would become vague, his answers short. He would gently change the subject back to the garden or her day, a shadow briefly crossing his face. One sunny afternoon, Susan was telling Sam about a funny incident from her childhood, something she hadn't thought about in years. As she spoke, she laughed, a genuine, happy laugh that surprised even herself. Sam watched her, a wide, warm smile on his face. When she finished her story, he reached out and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, sending a shiver down her spine. "It's good to see you smile like that, Susan," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. He didn't call her Miss Anthony anymore when they were alone. In that moment, looking into his kind eyes, Susan knew her feelings for Sam were growing stronger every day. It wasn't just friendship, it was something deeper, something that made her heart beat faster whenever he was near. And she saw a reflection of that same warmth, that same unspoken affection in Sam's gaze. He quickly pulled his hand back, as if suddenly remembering where they were. But the moment lingered in the air between them, sweet and fragile like the scent of the roses surrounding them. The happy bubble of Susan's secret garden meetings was soon threatened. One evening, her father, Mr. Anthony, made an announcement at the dinner table. His voice was full of satisfaction. "Victor will be joining us for dinner on Saturday," he said, looking directly at Susan. "And he has indicated that he intends to formally ask for your hand in marriage, Susan. We expect you to accept. It's a wonderful match, and it will secure this family's position for generations." Susan's fork clattered onto her plate. Her mother beamed at her, but Susan felt a cold dread creep into her heart. Saturday. That was only 3 days away. The walls of her gilded cage seemed to be closing in on her. "Father, Mother, Susan began, wanting to protest, to say she wasn't ready, that she didn't love Victor. But her father cut her off. "There is nothing to discuss, Susan. This is what is best. Victor is a fine young man from an excellent family. You will be happy." His tone was final, leaving no room for argument. The rest of the dinner was a blur for Susan. She felt sick with anxiety. The next day, she sought out Sam in the garden. Her face was pale and her eyes were troubled. "Sam," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "my parents, they are forcing me to marry someone. A man I don't care for. The proposal is on Saturday." She didn't mean to pour out her troubles to him, but the words just came out. Sam stopped his work, his expression immediately concerned. He looked at her, his eyes full of a deep sympathy that made her want to cry. "I am so sorry to hear that, Susan," he said quietly. "That is a difficult position to be in." "Difficult," Susan said, a bitter laugh escaping her. "It feels impossible. I feel so trapped, Sam. You're the only one who seems to understand that I want something more than just this." She gestured vaguely at the grand house behind them. Sam reached out as if to comfort her, then seemed to think better of it and let his hand fall to his side. "You are strong, Susan," he said. "Stronger than you think." But his voice was tinged with a sadness, a helplessness that mirrored her own. The day before Victor's dreaded dinner, Susan was walking near the edge of the Anthony estate, close to the main road. She was trying to clear her head, her thoughts in turmoil. She saw Sam near the old stone wall that marked the boundary of the property. He was speaking on a mobile phone, his back to her. Curiosity, mixed with her distress, made her pause. Sam's voice was different from how he usually spoke to her. It was more authoritative, more urgent. She couldn't hear all the words, but she caught a few phrases that made no sense for a simple gardener. The arrangements must be discreet. No, the timeline hasn't changed. I will handle the local contact myself. Local contact? Discreet arrangements? Susan frowned. What was he talking about? It sounded like business. Serious business. Just as she was about to step forward, Sam ended the call and turned. He saw her, and a flicker of something unreadable. Surprise? Alarm? Crossed his face before he quickly smoothed his expression into his usual calm demeanor. Susan, he said, his voice back to its normal softness. I didn't see you there. Sam, who were you talking to? She asked a little more directly than she intended. You sounded different. He gave a small, dismissive shrug. Oh, just a supplier about some new tools. Nothing important. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Are you feeling any better today? Susan wanted to press him, but his calm denial and the worry about her own impending crisis made her hesitate. Perhaps she had misheard. Perhaps it was nothing. Yet a small seed of unease was planted in her mind. There was more to Sam than met the eye. But with the threat of marrying Victor looming so large, she pushed the fleeting suspicion away, focusing instead on the storm gathering in her own life. Saturday arrived like a storm cloud. The air in the Anthony mansion was thick with unspoken expectations. Susan felt as though she were walking through a dream, a nightmare from which she couldn't wake. She dressed in the shimmering blue gown her mother had chosen, but her reflection in the mirror was a stranger, a pale, unhappy girl with fear in her eyes. Downstairs, Victor and his parents had already arrived. Victor was everything her parents admired, confident, wealthy, and from a family with an impeccable name. He greeted Susan with a polite smile, but his eyes held a look of cool assessment that made her shiver. Dinner was an elaborate affair, course after course of rich food that Susan could barely touch. The conversation was all about business, family connections, and future plans. Victor's future plans, which now seemed to include her as a decorative accessory. Finally, as dessert was served, Victor cleared his throat. He stood up, holding a small velvet box. Susan, he began, his voice smooth and practiced. We have known each other for some time, and our families are in agreement that we would make an excellent pair. You are beautiful, accomplished, and... Susan's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment she had dreaded. She looked at her parents, who were beaming with pride. She looked at Victor, his face expectant. And then she thought of Sam. She thought of his kind eyes, his gentle smile, his simple dream of a flower shop. She thought of the way he made her feel, like herself, like someone who mattered. Something inside her snapped. She couldn't do it. She couldn't sentence herself to a life of polite emptiness. Stop, Susan said, her voice surprisingly clear and steady. Everyone at the table stared at her, shocked into silence. Victor paused, the velvet box still in his hand. Victor, Susan continued, standing up, I appreciate your intentions, and I respect your family, but I cannot marry you. Gasps went around the table. Mrs. Anthony's face turned white. Mr. Anthony looked like he was about to explode. Susan, what is the meaning of this? Her father thundered, his voice shaking with rage. Have you lost your mind? No, father, Susan said, tears welling in her eyes, but her voice firm. For the first time, I think I am finding it. I cannot marry a man I do not love. I want a different life. Victor, recovering his composure, looked offended and embarrassed. Well, I see, he stammered, quickly putting the ring box away. His parents looked furious. You will do as you are told, Mr. Anthony shouted, rising from his chair. You will accept this proposal, or you will no longer be welcome in this house. You will be cut off, do you understand? Susan stood her ground, trembling but resolute. I understand, father, she whispered, but I still cannot do it. Just as the shouting match in the dining room reached its peak, a commotion was heard from the hallway. A stern-looking man in a dark suit Someone Susan had never seen before entered the dining room, followed by two other similarly dressed men. They looked like bodyguards. "Excuse me, Mr. Anthony," the first man said, his voice calm but authoritative. "We are here for Mr. Sampson." Everyone turned to stare at the newcomers. Mr. Anthony looked confused and angry. "Sampson? Who is Sampson? There is no one here by that name." At that exact moment, Sam, the gardener, walked into the hallway from the direction of the kitchen, perhaps drawn by the noise. He stopped short when he saw the men in suits. His face went pale. The man in the suit looked at Sam. "Your Highness," he said with a slight bow, "it is time to go. Your father is insistent." "Your Highness?" Susan stared at Sam, her mind reeling. The men in suits were looking at Sam. Her Sam? The quiet gardener? Sam closed his eyes for a moment, a look of resignation on his face. He then opened them and looked directly at Susan, his expression a mixture of apology and sadness. "Susan," he said, his voice quiet but clear, carrying across the stunned silence of the dining room. "There is something I must tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." He turned to her parents, to Victor and his family, who were all gaping in disbelief. "My name is not just Sam, it is Prince Samson of Eldoria. I left my home, my title, because I wanted to see what life was like without it. I wanted to be seen for who I am, not for my crown." Susan felt her legs go weak. A prince? The man she had shared her secrets with in the garden? The man who dreamed of a small flower shop? Was a prince? The strange phone call, his evasiveness about his past. It all suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. Mr. Anthony's jaw had dropped. Mrs. Anthony looked as if she might faint. Victor just looked utterly bewildered. "I came here seeking anonymity," Prince Samson continued, his gaze returning to Susan. "I took a job as a gardener because I love working with my hands, with nature. I never intended to deceive anyone, least of all you, Susan." His eyes pleaded for her understanding. "The men you saw watching me, the strange calls. My family has been trying to find me for months." One of the suited men stepped forward. "Your Highness, we really must leave. A car is waiting." Sam, Prince Samson, looked at Susan, his heart in his eyes. "I have to go, Susan, but please believe me, my feelings for you, they were real. They had nothing to do with who you are or who I am." The dining room was in chaos after Prince Samson and his men departed. Victor and his family left quickly, full of indignation and confusion. Susan's parents were in a state of shock, alternating between anger at Susan and awe at the revelation that their gardener was a prince. Susan, however, felt numb. She retreated to her room, the grand pronouncements and angry words fading behind her. A prince. Sam was a prince. It felt like a story from one of her books, not real life. She sat on her bed, the blue dress feeling heavy and suffocating. Had it all been a lie? His gentle smiles, his shared dreams of a flower shop? But then she remembered the look in his eyes when he spoke of his love for plants, the genuine concern when she was unhappy, the way he had looked at her just before he left. No, those feelings couldn't have been faked. He had hidden his identity, yes. But hadn't she also been hiding her true self, suffocating under her family's expectations? He had wanted to be loved for who he was, not for a title. Wasn't that what she wanted too? Her anger at her parents had faded, replaced by a strange mix of fear and a new, fragile hope. Sam's revelation was enormous, a chasm of societal difference far greater than she had ever imagined. But he had said his feelings for her were real, and she knew, deep in her heart, that her feelings for him were real too. Later that night, there was a soft knock on her door. It was her mother, her face pale, and her usual composure gone. "Susan," Mrs. Anthony said, her voice unusually hesitant, "a message arrived for you from Prince Samson." She handed Susan a thick, creamy envelope with an official-looking seal. With trembling hands, Susan opened it. The letter was from Sam. He apologized again for his deception. He explained more about his life, the pressures he faced, and why he had run away. He wrote of how much their time together in the garden had meant to him, how she had shown him what genuine connection felt like, And then he asked if he could see her, if she would be willing to talk, to understand. He said he would respect her decision, whatever it was. Susan read the letter several times. Her choice was clear. Her parents might still be reeling, society might disapprove, and the future was terrifyingly uncertain. But Sam had shown her kindness, understanding, and a glimpse of a life where she could be true to herself, and she loved him. Susan agreed to meet Prince Samson. They met not in a palace or a grand mansion, but in a quiet public park, away from prying eyes. Sam was dressed in simple clothes again, looking more like the gardener she knew than a prince, though there was a new maturity in his eyes. They talked for hours. Susan spoke of her initial shock and hurt, but also of her understanding. Sam listened, and then he spoke of his fears, his hopes, and his undeniable love for her. He told her that his experience as a gardener in meeting her had changed him. He no longer wanted to run from his responsibilities, but he wanted to face them with her by his side, if she would have him. He also said that his dream of a flower shop wasn't just a whim. It represented a piece of the real life he craved. "I don't know what the future holds, Susan," he said, taking her hands. "My world is complicated, but I know I love you, and I believe we can face anything together." Susan looked into his eyes, and she saw the same sincerity, the same love she had seen in the gardener who had returned her fallen book. "I love you too, Sam," she said, her voice firm. "Prince or gardener, it doesn't matter to me. It's you I love." Their decision to be together sent ripples through both their worlds. Susan's parents, after their initial shock and a great deal of persuasion, and perhaps the undeniable allure of their daughter marrying a prince, even one who had worked as their gardener, slowly began to accept the situation. They saw that Susan was truly happy, truly herself, in a way they had never seen before. Sam, or Prince Samson, returned to Eldoria, but not alone. Susan went with him. It wasn't an easy transition. There were protocols to learn, a skeptical royal court to win over, and a public fascinated by their unusual love story. But they faced it together, their love for each other, their greatest strength. And true to his word, Sam did not forget his dream. In a quiet corner of the palace gardens in Eldoria, with Susan's help, he started a small, beautiful flower shop. It wasn't just for show, it was a real shop, open to the public on certain days, a place where he could still work with his hands and share the beauty of flowers. It was a symbol of their love, a reminder that even a prince and an heiress could find happiness in simple dreams, as long as they were true to their hearts. They had overcome societal expectations, hidden identities, and the pressures of their different worlds. Their love story became a legend in Eldoria, a tale of a prince who found his heart in a garden, and an heiress who found her freedom in loving him. What do you learn from this story so far? Do you also believe true love is possible and can fight for it if you were Susan? And what happened to Victor and his parents after their rejection by Susan? You'll find out everything in the next episode of this story. Kindly drop your comment and share this video to help us grow our channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you in our next video.